What's up guys, it's Ryan here, and welcome to this video where we are going to be testing out the brand new tier 92 Blightbound Crossbows. These crossbows are obtained as a rare drop from the new boss Solak that just came out this past week, and the set that I'm using in this video was purchased 2 days after release for a total cost of 3.5 billion GP, 1.7 billion for the main hand and 1.8 billion for the offhand. In this video, we're going to be going to a variety of different bosses and PvM fights, and we're going to be testing out these bows, and at the end of the video, I'm going to let you guys know what I think, sum it up, and let you guys know if I think these bows are worth the money. So, without further ado, let's get right into the video. Before we get started, I'm going to quickly talk about perks. In previous testing videos, if I'm testing out a lower tier weapon, I'm not going to put super expensive perks on it. That kind of defeats the purpose of the video if I'm looking at something budget. A good example of that would be the obliteration staff. I just threw crappy perks on that because you're not saving much money if you spend 50 mil perking up a 30 mil weapon. That being said, with these Blightbound crossbows, I went all out. I have the main hand augmented with Aftershock 3, and the offhand is augmented with Precise 4 Equilibrium 2, which costs about 300 mil to get. So these things are completely perked out to the maximum. You could not set them up any better than they are right now. So now that we've taken a look at the weapon, let's go right into the video, and the first place I'm gonna go is Telos. In the past, I have been very guilty of laughing at and bashing on Telos with ranged. With Telos using mainly melee attacks, I figured I was going to get absolutely obliterated, and I went into this with extremely low hopes. But as is my job on this series, I test out these things so you guys don't have to, so I approached it with an open mind, and I wanted to give it the best shot possible. What you're watching right now is 600% enraged Telos with ranged. I'm wearing full power gear as I don't actually have full perked ranged Acto, and in terms of bolt choices, I'm using predominantly the Hydrix per criminal bolts, as their special effect is to give you increased adrenaline gain, which I thought would be extremely useful. You could definitely sub those out for ruby bolts if these are too expensive, but if you're going to be spending 3.5 bill on some weapons, I think it made sense to splurge on some good bolts as well. These things go for about 12 or 13k each, so they're expensive, but they're not so expensive that it's not worth using in certain instances. As you can see, that P1 was pretty clean. We got it phased before the hold still, which is always a pretty good sign. Now you're looking at a P3, and I had to improvise a rotation. Obviously, I've done well over 1,000 Telos kills with magic, and this is my first time using ranged, but it actually seemed to have worked out pretty well. You can also look at the kill timer, and we're just hitting the 3-minute mark midway through the third phase, which is actually quite passable. Is that a record of the world? Definitely not, but it's also not extremely slow. I was honestly expecting to be close to the 4 or 5 minute mark to phase it, so this time was pleasantly surprising to me. I seem to be hitting pretty accurately with the Reckless Aura, and with no debuffs or anything, it seems to be working out quite well. And as you can see, I am phasing it right after the first uppercut and before the hold still, which is pretty much the same phase point as I get with magic. So overall, pretty good through the first 3 phases. Now for phase 4. Whenever the minion spawned, I put on my shield and I wielded my mechanized Chinchompas. After that, I used Revenge and Reflect to get increased damage with the shield on, and I went to town on the minions. This was a fantastic way to clear minions. No charging a detonate, it wasn't clunky at all, and every single ability you use works as an AoE. Being able to use a snipe into a rapid fire basically cleared the minions right off the bat, and this was one of the biggest perks of using ranged. The thing that surprised me most about this way to clear the minions was how freeform the rotation is. With magic, you always want to Revenge, Reflect, charge a Deado, and then release it with something like a Dragon Breath, and with range, you could literally use anything in any order, and because everything works as an AoE, you get the minions cleared effectively either way. Now, most importantly, let's go into phase 5. Heading into phase 5, I went with a very simple rotation. I didn't bother with Natural Instinct, I simply ran to the green beam, dropped a Death Swiftness, put on my shield, put on my Chinchompas, and I went to work on the minions, and you'll see it was really easy. The thing that was really safe about it was that I'm killing the minions with thresholds. If you're using magic, you basically need a Tsunami. If you Tsunami, you won't be able to Cade right away after, which can be a very large risk depending on how fast the virus comes. So you'll see here, I'm clearing the minions, and as soon as the virus comes out, because it's not a green virus, I can Cade it instantly. I'm already on full adren and I'm just holding it there. That is something that makes P5 extremely safe, especially if you're someone like me who at times using magic would get comboed out by the virus. And then as you can see, I get the beam swap I want, I drop a Dread Nip, I'm just threshing until the rock falls, and then it's an onslaught to the end of the kill. The final kill time was about 8:30, which is once again by no means a record, but it's definitely passable for 600 enrage, especially for me. That's a little slower than I'd get with magic, but not by very much. So overall with these crossbows, the hit chance was just great enough that I could actually recommend them for Telos, which is not something I thought I'd be saying before making this video. I think the ability to use criminal bolts makes these crossbows significantly better than camping something like a Saren Godbow, and the hit chance on the tier 92 makes it just high enough that you don't necessarily need to debuff to be able to land most of your debilitates and most of your high damaging offensive abilities. Now before we switch bosses, I've got one more Telos clip to show you guys. After breezing through 600 enraged range Telos on the very first try, I thought I would up it and go up to 700, and as you can see, an absolute nightmare, the back beam volcanics. So this was a real test for me. I had no idea what to expect or what to do. I'm not going through a natural instinct rotation, and as you can see, I basically death swiftness, I reflect, I don't even revenge, and I'm still able to clear the minions because I'm doing it with thresholds. I'm just banging them down with thresholds, and then as soon as the virus comes out, I was ready to Cade, and I was just holding that Cade until that point. So even though it's not pretty, and that's not smooth at all, the fact that I was able to clear back beam volcanics fairly effectively with ranged, while also making some huge mistakes in my rotation, is something that you definitely would not get with magic. Let's roll it back and go over it one more time. If I had done this exact same thing with magic, where I'd gone through my reflect rotation but I'd forgotten to use revenge, and I'd charged up a detonate tsunami without revenge, the minions wouldn't have cleared and I would have had no way to clear them. The chance of dying after that situation is almost 100%. You're either going to get stunned out and murdered, or you're going to have to stun the minions in a runaway. And either way, you're either going to die to the minions, you're going to die to Telos, or you're going to waste most of your DPS time on Telos killing the minions, and you're not going to get through in one cycle, which is equally not good. Basically what I'm saying is, even though this ranged Telos may not be as fast as magic, it's definitely a lot safer, especially on the 5th phase. So if you're someone who struggles with the 5th phase of Telos, this is definitely a good way to make it a lot more consistent, where even if you make a couple mistakes in your rotation, instead of ending up in Death's Office, you'll just end up with a slightly longer kill. So overall, for Telos, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I would have to recommend these things. They were actually quite good, and I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10. Is it going to be better than magic? Definitely not, but is it going to be safer and potentially easier? I would say yes. The next place I went was Rax, and Rax with range is one of my favorite things to do. This is how I got my first 500 or 600 kills at Rax back in the day, and these bows definitely don't disappoint. I was on a TreeHill, and I didn't even need a Reaper necklace to have literally 100% hit chance. I honestly don't think I splashed a single time, and that's without even having a Reaper necklace, so the hit chance is absolutely fantastic. You'll see I'm getting really quick kills, the death swiftness rotations are extremely solid, and once again, just like at Telos, I was alternating the Hydrix criminal bolts for increased adrenaline gain, and then the ruby bolts for the first couple phases. There's not a whole lot to say about Rax other than that ranged is a very safe way to go about it. If you've tried melee Rax and you've gotten into trouble before, ranged is the way to go. It's really easy, and with these crossbows, you can absolutely melt the boss. My average kill speed down path 2-3 was 4 minutes and 5 seconds, which is extremely passable. I wasn't doing any sort of speed kill attempts, I was just going in, doing some casual Rax, and the kills are going extremely well. You'll notice that on the last phase, I'm consistently finishing the entire phase inside my death swiftness, which is also a really good sign. If I wasn't getting it down in one death swiftness, it might be better to thresh the start and then do an onslaught, but that was completely unnecessary. You'll also see the Hydrix bolt procs in the last phase going off and giving me a ton of adrenaline, which is really nice when you lose 50% adrenaline right before the acid core comes out. This probably comes as a given, but even with a 0% adren start, it was very easy to get Araxxor's phase 1 health down before the web burns down, and I was consistently getting it down with a ton of extra room for error. Every single Rax kill I did, the web was only between 70 and 75% burned down at the time when its HP is completely down. Having 100% hit chance is something that you don't get at a lot of bosses, and that makes it so much easier to output an insane amount of damage. The other thing that this does is it allows you to be very consistent with your rotations. You could approach every single kill the exact same way, and you're going to end up with very similar kill speeds every time you go about it. It's always frustrating when you go for a high damaging ability like Tendrils and it splashes and you get no damage out of it. You've wasted your adrenaline and it kind of sucks. So Rax is definitely one of those places where these crossbows shine for that reason in particular. Overall, I don't think you necessarily need to buy these crossbows just for Rax. If you've got 100% hit chance with these crossbows and an Amulet of Souls, you would also have 100% hit chance using Ascension crossbows or the Reaper necklace. So is it necessarily worth buying these crossbows just for Rax? I would say no, but if you have them, it is an extremely good time and I'd strongly recommend it. And I'm going to give them a 9 out of 10 here, although it is a slightly unnecessary 9. The third boss I brought these crossbows Crossbows 2 is the Magister. The Magister is one of the bosses that most people use magic at. Vulnerability is extremely useful, and it allows you to put out a ton of damage. 4 ticking damage also gets boosted by the 25% corruption that you get stacked, so you can get extremely fast kills with magic. That being said, ranged really didn't disappoint here. I've got really solid hit chance, I'm using the Reckless Aura, and I'm using a Scrimshaw of Cruelty, and once again I'm using those Hydrix bolts for increased adrenaline gain, and overall, this went pretty well. And surprisingly enough, I was actually able to get my personal record using ranged, which definitely says something. So initially when I went to the Magister, I'd been bringing a vulnerability switch for the start of every kill, but I was streaming at the time and I asked my Twitch chat if they thought that using ranged at Magister with Vuln switch was, feasible and something that most people would do, and I got a resounding no as an answer. Apparently that's really sweaty, so for the Magister kills in this video, I did not use any magic switch at the start. I just straight up went with the range gear and tried to get it down as quick as possible. I think if I were to do it again, I wouldn't Death Swift right at the start of the kill. I'd probably choose to Death Swift closer to 150k life points just to guarantee that you get through the whole thing. But overall, it was really smooth. Hit chance is good, I don't even need a Reaper necklace or a Nihil, and I really don't have any complaints to make. You could definitely easily get a Khopesh done like this, and it'll do the trick. It's really all about optimizing aura times, and this is one of those bosses that you don't necessarily need to be using magic and maniacal on, and if your maniacal is on cooldown, it's going to be better to use ranged and the reckless aura than to go down to a different aura like runic accuracy while using magic. So overall, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 at the Magister. It definitely did the trick. It's probably not as good as magic. My average kill time was about 1 minute flat, whereas with magic I was getting closer to 55 seconds on average, but there's definitely potential for some good kills there. Overall, I'm going to give these crossbows a 7 out of 10 at the Magister. It's not going to be as good as magic, but it's quite passable and it will do the trick. One other thing I'm going to note, because I know some of you might ask this in the comments, why didn't you test out the Hex Hunter bow? I actually did take the Hex Hunter bow to the Magister, and the kill times were not as good as these crossbows. So if you're contemplating buying one or the other, the crossbows will most certainly be better. The base damage output is quite similar, but the ability to use enchanted bolts with the crossbows makes them significantly better than a Hex Hunter bow. Boss number 4 on the chopping block is Virago, and as some of you guys know, I have done some Rago duos with range before, and it works out quite well. So long as you've got one person using magic on Vulns, you generally end up with some pretty decent P5s. None of the kill speeds were particularly impressive, but the kills were relatively clean. One big advantage to doing Virago with magic is the ability to use Sonic Wave to increase the hit chance on your Debilitate, and in 3 kills that I did, I splashed 1 Debilitate total, which isn't the end of the world, but it's a little extra pushback that I probably wouldn't have had to deal with if I hadn't been using the crossbows. Other than that, we didn't fail bring him down or anything, all that went by very quickly, and the number of thresholds you have with range gives you a lot of options to deal a lot of damage really quickly. As you can see there, that is a 12k flanking hit followed by an 8.5k, and you can hit like an absolute truck. I was basing for the durations, so I didn't get to fully take advantage of flanking, but still it was good to have. Overall, it's kind of the same boat as the Magister. You can definitely do a Raga with range, and it's one of those things where if Maniacal's on cooldown, you'd be way better off using range and reckless as opposed to popping something like Runic or another inferior aura. So overall, it's a good way to get over aura escape. It was certainly manageable, and you can get a pretty decent Rago hour in using ranged. The Hydrix Criminal Bolts are extremely useful on the 5th phase as well, because the hardest thing about P5 is building adrenaline, and this extra adrenaline gain allowed me to sneak in a couple extra thresholds I otherwise wouldn't be able to get in. To sum up Rago, I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. It's obviously not going to be as good as Magic. The utility of Magic and also being able to charge a Deado is significantly greater than being able to duo on ranged, but did we get kills? Absolutely. Was it fairly accurate and fairly decent? Absolutely. Boss number 5 on the list was Legos, and Legos are an extremely easy boss. You definitely don't need to get these crossbows just for them, but they did do a pretty good job. It was easy to get a lot of kills consistently, and there's really not a whole lot to say here other than that in testing these out, I ended up getting 3 signets in 6 minutes, so I'm gonna have to give that at least a solid 8 out of 10. They did the trick pretty easily. You definitely don't need enchanted bolts. Rubies aren't going to be super useful. Onyx aren't going to be super necessary. Hydrix for a Dren gain you're not going to need, so really you could go here with a Saren Godbow and have pretty much the same result. So this is one where if you've got a Saren Godbow, there'd be no reason at all to switch to something else for it. But still, if this is what you have, you'll get some very good, easy, consistent kills, and there's really nothing to complain about. They'd be on par with both the Hex Hunter bow and the Saren God bow, so pretty good, but definitely not something you need to pick up for this. Next up on the list, we have regular necks. And before we start this, I am terrible at soloing normal necks. My kill speeds are always really bad, so take all of this with a grain of salt. Check out this blood phase. As you can see, I'm getting it down extremely quickly, as easy as a limitless snapshot rapid fire, and it's phased before the blood sacrifice. This is what I did for every single kill that I went and got. My average kill speed was 3 minutes and 15 seconds, and my fastest kill was a little bit under 3 minutes 10 seconds, which I know is pretty decent, but the right person could definitely get faster kills with less good gear. For that reason, I'm going to be showing an entire kill so that you guys can get a sense for the hit chance and everything else. This just isn't a boss I've done a lot of. I've had the pet for a long time, and after duoing for the pet, I just never really went back and learned how to properly solo. So this way you guys will get an eye for the hit chance and everything else. I also was not bringing a Vuln switch for blood phase, and everything else is pretty standard. I'm using an Armadillo book, I'm camping a Reaper necklace, and I'm wearing full power gear with the Reckless aura. Overall, I had a really good experience. The hit chance was almost 100%, which is quite good for next, as this is a boss where hit chance can be really hard to come by. So overall, I would give these things a solid 8 out of 10 at next. The only real negative is the crossbow range. If you're using something like a Noxious Longbow or Saren Godbow, you can run next while still being able to attack, whereas if you're in crossbow range, you can't do that. So you can only run next when next is actively trying to hit you with a melee swipe. Overall, the kills were good, they were pretty easy. I'm really not great at this boss, so the fact that I didn't fail a single kill should say something, but I didn't notice anything incredible. Next up, we are going to raids. In this first clip you're watching, I am the backup at Beastmaster, and I really wanted to put these bows to the test. I didn't splash any defensive abilities, which is really good, and the Hydrix bolts allowed me to build a Dren even quicker than normal, which allowed me to deal some damaging thresholds while also going through my defensive rotation. There isn't really anything special to say about raids. It's a pretty simple situation, there's not a whole lot to do, but the damage output was good, the hit chance was good, and I would definitely use them again here. When you're raiding, you can really pick whatever combat style you'd like, and especially for Beastmaster, it really doesn't matter a whole lot. These things did what they had to do. Now, at Yakimaru, it's a little bit different. In general, most of the people on the team are going to be using magic. Magic gives you a lot of great abilities to wrangle the jellyfish, and the ability to Fortick gives you very good damage output as well. Now, that being said, if the majority of your team is using magic, you can't actually bleed over each other or you'll be canceling each other's bleeds. So if you're on a serious raids team, it is always good to have 1 or 2 people using ranged, and as one of those people, I was able to output a lot of damage. The easy switch into flanking with the crossbows was awesome, and everything else went really smoothly as well. So overall at raids, if you're going to be using range, these crossbows will absolutely do the trick, and these will be the best range weapons you could possibly bring. You've got the Hydrix bolts for increased adrenaline gain, and then you can even swap to the Onyx bolts at any moment if you think you're going to run out of food. The adaptability of bolt swapping was really nice because if people on the team went down or I thought I was going to have to survive longer than anticipated, I could put on the Onyx bolts and I would literally use no food at any point. Overall at raids, I'm going to give these bows a 9 out of 10. They're best in slot, they're adaptable, and they more than do the job. In the raid that you just watched here, the Shark 10 went down on the very first pool, and I ended up having to take over the role. As soon as the Shark 10 went down, I put on the Onyx bolts. I used almost no supplies for the rest of the kill, and that gave me enough to make it through the Mirage phase without any close calls. The last place we're going to go is Nex, Angel of Death. AOD is a great boss to test out these crossbows because on every team, one person has to be using range to take advantage of the mechanized Chinchompas to clear out the minions. Their role is primarily to do as much damage as they possibly can, especially to the minions. They need to clear the minions as quickly as possible and then call the order. Now, with an optimal chinning setup, you'd have the chins in your main hand and you'd have a crossbow with Aftershock 3 on it in your offhand. I did not have this in this instance because I did not have enough money to buy a whole other crossbow just for this one clip. As you can see, a lot of 12Ks, a lot of really hard hits, and the chinning was extremely effective. It's important to note that when you're on the minions, you pretty much have a 100% hit chance anyway, so the accuracy factor didn't really come into play too much. That being said, the damage output would have been slightly higher than Ascension's, so it's going to be a little bit better, and these crossbows will be the best possible thing that you can take to Angel of Death if you are the chinner. I was dealing pretty heavy damage. I was beaming a lot of the kills, and I was usually hitting upwards of 1 million damage per kill, which is really decent. Obviously, the amount of damage you deal per kill depends a lot on your team and your kill speed, but still, the overall damage output was pretty high. If properly perked, I'll give the Blightbound Crossbows a 9 out of 10. If you want to be the chinner at AOD effectively, these will be the best weapons you can bring as a main. Being able to bolt swap was also really nice. I would camp the Ruby bolts for the first half of the kill, and then as soon as they started giving me diminishing returns with procs, I would swap to the Hydrix bolts for the extra adren. So anyway guys, that is a full rundown on the brand new tier 92 Blightbound Crossbows. Overall, I was really surprised by how good they were. I didn't think they'd be a huge jump from Ascensions, but there's definitely a pretty large difference, and I would strongly recommend getting these if range is a combat style you use a lot. I had an absolute blast testing these, and I'm gonna hang on to them for a while longer. Especially at Telos, I was really blown away, and I'm gonna start actually properly doing Telos with ranged at this point. I'm gonna do a maniacal hour with magic, and then as soon as that hour's up, instead of using an aura refresh, I'm just gonna pop reckless and do a ranged hour after that. Anyway guys, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe, leave me a comment if you have any questions or concerns about anything at all, and outside of that, I hope you're all doing well, have a great one, and as always, peace out.